construction packages that go throughout the Central Valley. As you can see, a couple of the photos here that are showing some of the work that are happening in Fresno and throughout the Central Valley. So just to give you an idea of where we are right now, is that the 2016 business plan, it is the first fiscally constrained business plan. And because of that, the High Speed Rail Authority has a budget and a fiscal plan to complete the first operating system. And that first operating system has been identified as Bakersfield to San Jose. And because of that, this section, San Jose to Merced, is being looked at right now as far as clearing the environmental process. That is a change from the 2014 business plan that had construction going south first. And so that I wanted to just lay out to you. I know it seems like things are kind of changing and moving a lot faster in this area, and that is one of the major reasons why. So the project section that you're in, as I said, is the San Jose to Merced project section. Just to give you a really quick overview of the environmental process, as I said, that we're in right now. In the spring, we're developing the project definition. Ongoing activities have been technical analysis, defining the station footprint, for the stations in this project section that we'll go into a little bit later. That's San Jose and Gilroy. And ongoing outreach. This has definitely been part of it, but we also have other outreach opportunities, open houses, and a variety of other more involved meetings that we've been having with stakeholders. As we move forward, we'll be looking to identify a preliminary preferred alternative, which is one of the reasons why we're here tonight, to talk about some of the alternatives being looked at and studied in the environmental process. And then as we move forward, that preliminary preferred alternative will be going forward in the draft environmental document, which all of you will have an opportunity to submit a formal comment on. And then that will lead to the final environmental document at the end of 2017. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary really quickly to walk through some of the high-level alignment, and then this will be very high level, but there'll be another opportunity to dive a lot deeper into it, not only up here with Google Maps, but also with the alignment maps in the other room. So we'll just let him walk through it, and then we'll save any questions for those more in-depth opportunities.
So good evening again. I'm Gary Kennelly. I'm the project manager for the section. So this is, a high-level view just to sort of give you an idea of the overall corridor. We'll zoom in a little bit in this area, but then to get into detail, actually, when we look at the Google Maps, and then we have those maps in there. So the section from San Jose and north of Diridon Station essentially follows the Monterey 101 corridor from San Jose down to Gilroy. We then pick up 152, follow the path of 152 through the Pacheco Pass around the San Luis Reservoir, cross I-5 as we come into the Central Valley, and then follow Henry Miller Road out to the Central Valley Y, which is the connection with the north-south section that's under construction at the moment. Essentially, the way this map works is each color represents a different alternative. So where you see lots of colors, there's still lots of alternatives being considered. In other places, there's only one or two. Up in San Jose, we have an aerial alignment that goes aerial over the Diridon Station. We also was looking at an at-grade option that stays in the Caltrain right-of-way using the blended service operation. Coming south from San Jose into the Monterey Highway corridor, two options, both in Monterey Highway. One is an at-grade option, and when I say at-grade is we are down, the high-speed train is on the ground, adjacent to Union Pacific, not in Union Pacific's corridor, but actually adjacent to Union Pacific's right-of-way. And whenever we get to streets, we then have to put grade separations in, because we cannot have cars, buses, trucks, or anything crossing the high-speed train corridor. So we would have essentially at-grade high-speed train, and then predominantly in San Jose, we'd have underpasses or overpasses to get the vehicles either side of the tracks. The other option is we would have a viaduct where a high-speed train would be up on a structure 30 to 60 feet high, and so then all the roads would stay underneath, and high-speed train would be on the higher level. As we get down the next section, we get down past Cody Creek Park. This is where we split to either stay on the Monterey Highway corridor or go over to the 101 corridor. There are options to flip between the two. The first one, working with the city of Morgan Hill, was to avoid potential to avoiding the Morgan Hill downtown area, is to sort of take this West Cody Creek Parkway bypass around the creek over to 101, and then follow 101, and then come back over to Monterey at San Martin. We also have an option that would stay on the east of 101, and then on the Monterey Highway corridor, again, we have the two options, one an aerial viaduct option and one at grade. Coming down to Gilroy, we have two choices. One is the downtown station that's co-located with the current Caltrain station, downtown Gilroy. The other station location is East Gilroy, and that's behind the Premium Outlet Malls on Leavesley Road. From there, both alignments converge as we come to 152, and then we have a section that is predominantly tunnels through the Pacheco Pass, approximately following the line of 152. And then, as I said, we come around on the north side of the reservoir, and then we have just a single alignment across the valley adjacent to Henry Miller Road. As Morgan said, we've been doing the outreach as well as developing our alternatives, and as part of that, we've got some initial feedback, and some of this I've already mentioned. One is there's the 101 option as designed went over the Cody Creek Park, which is a county park, and transportation projects are required to do everything they can to avoid impacts to the park. So we are looking at ways to avoid that alternative, and this west of Cody Creek is one way to avoid that. Another option is this 101 downtown Gilroy. Currently, with this very southerly crossover, we're right in the vicinity of the county airport, and if we were aerial in that vicinity, we'd be actually in the flight path. And so to avoid that, we are actually in a trench. However, that becomes very disruptive because we're in a trench. We have to open cut all the way there. It's about 4 miles of trench. It's about 60 feet deep. We have to temporarily relocate the Caltrans way station. And then if we're coming back over to downtown Gilroy, we have about a 1,000-foot tunnel to get back underneath 101. So again, higher cost, but also a higher impacts from the trench. Another thing we are looking at also is down in Gilroy. We've been working with them closely with the station planning exercise. Currently in Gilroy, we have a couple of options. One is a very high aerial, which is generally unpopular because of the visual impacts. We have a modified at grade, which is an extension of the at grade on Monterey Highway, but we're elevated about 15 feet to allow those roads to go underneath the high-speed train. And there's also a trench option, which again has issues because of the creeks. We have to be very deep to get under the creeks. So one thing Gilroy has asked us to look at is just extending the viaduct through the downtown location, so it would be about 25, 30 feet high. Roads would go underneath. We wouldn't have all the road disruption and property impacts from doing grade separations, but it would be a lower level facility, so you don't have the same visual impacts. So these are all the sort of ones we're being studied. We're sort of right now developing some of these new alternatives. As we have them, we have some of them in the room next door. We're looking to get some feedback on these alternatives. Also, we need to do the environmental analysis. And then our goal is, once that is sort of far enough to a point where we can actually have an informed discussion of the alternatives, be looking to come back and actually discuss those and start getting some feedback, as Morgan mentioned, starting to progress to actually identifying a preliminary preferred alternative sometime in the winter 2017. So this here is just I was talking to some people next door about this Morgan Hill bypass alternative that's being developed. So again, when these alternatives along Monterey Highway and 101 were first developed, they were developed about 2010-11. Lots changed since then, especially in downtown Morgan Hill. A lot more infill development has happened. So now, coming through at grade adjacent to the railroad is going to have a lot of disruption to some recent development. So to avoid that, and also avoiding impacts to the park and impacts to the recreation facility, the soccer fields, and the aquatic center by tenant, we looked at potentially coming from the Monterey Highway corridor, taking the Cody Creek bypass over to 101, but staying on the west side of 101, staying as close as we can to 101 from essentially Burnett over to Tennant, and then going back to the Monterey Highway corridor, which means we're far enough north of the airport that we don't need to go in the trench. We stay between the railroad and 101, so we don't have to cross those facilities, so we avoid complex structures. We would still need to go over the existing intersections, but at least we'd be adjacent rather than straddling over the entire highway. I can talk. I normally have Bruce to talk to this, but
I can do it. Okay, so we're gonna save questions on I want to get into the deep dive of the alignment after this, so I want to get through this. I know people have a lot of questions about the alignment, so we want to give a lot of time to that, but I do want to get through the presentation first. So station planning, we have 2 stations in this project section. I want to talk about them briefly. We have San Jose. We have 2 options that are being looked at, and as you can see here, here's the initial study area and the preliminary footprint. And what we are clearing in this project is just the station footprint. We are not clearing the planning of the station specifically as it goes through the alignment. So those are the things that we're looking at for San Jose. It is going to be a multimodal station. There are already many, many different modes coming through there. We have Caltrain, we have Capitol Corridor, we have Freight, ACE, and what will be additions will be BART and high-speed rail, and there might be extensions of the Capitol Corridor from San Jose, even going down to Salinas and Monterey via Gilroy. So that brings us to Gilroy. The downtown Gilroy station is being looked at. Up here you can see the study area for that. I believe that's a 1/4 mile radius around the station. And then you can see the East Gilroy study area right here. Those are both being looked at as alignment alternatives. So they are both being studied, and once a preliminary preferred is decided, one of these will be decided on. Right now we're still working on the studies to lead to that preliminary preferred alternative being decided on, but they are both being studied equally. So I can skip over a little bit of the small business stuff, but I do want to show this one video. It is from a stakeholder in the Fresno area. I know a lot of you are concerned about right-of-way and impacts from the alignment, and I think that this video is helpful in that, and I want to let you know that we want to continue that conversation with you all. So I think if I go over here.
You know, that was scary at first because we only heard horror stories, you know.
Al Perez is the owner of Main Event Graphics in Fresno. He was one of the first businesses that had to move to make way for high-speed rail.
When I first heard about it, like 1.5 years went by, and we were just like, man, this is not going to happen.
But it is happening, and as it happens,
I got to say that it came right on time.
Al was already planning to move. He wanted to move next to a church in downtown Fresno. Instead, he moved into a church just blocks from his old location.
And I started seeing crosses all over the place on the floor. It was a church. Right there, we knew it was for us.
But those few blocks have made a world of difference.
That other area was like rough, man. Like there was issues like often. And right here, even though it's around the corner, it's like no one even knocks on our door, man. It's crazy how calm it is.
Calm on the outside, but busy inside. Busy printing more t-shirts than ever.
This thing runs 1,000 t-shirts an hour. This is the beast right here. We were able to add more equipment. We were able to take on bigger contracts. Couldn't do that before in the other place. It was too small.
Al credits working with the High-Speed Rail Authority and the Fresno EDC for helping him get fair market value for his old location and helping him secure the new one. We should also mention, Al didn't move just one company, he moved two. Welcome to Main Event Boxing. If the printing business has Al's mind, the boxing ring has his heart. For 10 years, he has helped kids get off the streets and into the ring. And for most of that time, he and his partners haven't made a dime.
It was pure passion driving us. We like to give back and provide outlets for these kids.
It takes some of these kids off the streets, and it gives them something to do. And they fall in love with it, and a lot of them are becoming national champions, professional fighters.
It gives me something to do every day, keep me out of trouble, and keeps my life together. Yeah, me and my brother are both in this together, and we're both, hopefully, we become world champions one day.
Moving the boxing ring to its own location has allowed the printing business to grow, expanding to add a sign business in the back. It's helped the boxing club grow as well, celebrating its grand opening in June.
It's making money to support itself and also the trainers right now. That wasn't the case before. It was just pretty much a club, and now it's actually open to the public.
At one time, Al might have feared that moving for high-speed rail would have been a knockout blow for both of his businesses. But now he says,
and it worked out perfectly. Couldn't have been happier.
Okay, great, thank you. So I just want to reiterate that we do have folks from our acquisition team here to answer any questions about that process as we move forward. We know that there are going to be impacts throughout the corridor, and so we want to be available to answer any questions about that process. But this is just one example from a business owner in Fresno. I'm going to go really quickly through the business stuff because I know we want to get to Q&A really quickly, but we are working with small businesses throughout the state, so we're employing lots of local businesses and lots of California residents. So upcoming outreach activities, as you can see, we in September we've been out here. This is the fourth presentation we've given here in Morgan Hill, and that is due to no small part of the Morgan Hill staff getting us here and working with us to engage with you guys in the community and getting the word out that we're looking for feedback. Some other folks that we're working with is Gilroy. You can see we have some presentations coming up in October, and we also have community working groups and technical working groups that we work with. We have a community working group that is Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and East, and that group is comprised of different neighborhood association leaders, business leaders, and a variety of other leaders in the area. And we worked with the cities to get those groups. So they're great working groups that we can present information to and get feedback on with the community's interests in mind. And then our technical working group is made up of city, county staff, and other agencies. So let's see, that's it. Okay, so I don't know if you want to just start opening it up to questions, and then do we want to save some time to look at the maps afterwards? Okay?
That'd be great. Thank you, Morgan. Just a couple of housekeeping items. High Speed Rail has their database, and they're collecting emails and all, whatever their outreach is. In the city of Morgan Hill, we have a website as well where we are keeping all of this information. You can go back and watch the presentations, and you can also put in your name and contact information. We, the city, can reach out to you if you go in and sign in through the city's website. And somebody who knows the website, but if you just go to the city's website and look up High Speed Rail, it'll take you right to it. With that, again, being mindful of the time and wanting us to move on to the next room before the Planning Commission, we just want to get to questions. I know folks have comments. I recommend that we keep the comments short and try to get to a lot of the questions if we can. I did make a commitment to start with this gentleman here, and if that's okay, we'll just get started.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming and doing this. I've been a resident of Morgan Hill for 16 years. I'm a test engineer by trade, and I'm a foamer. That's somebody who loves trains. But I have two requests, and this is primarily as a test engineer. Okay. My first request is to erect a story pole framework to demonstrate to our residents what the visual impact of these two alignments will be. Now, if you're not familiar with story poles, the Santa Clara County government website describes story poles as follows. Story poles are three-dimensional, full-scale silhouette structures that outline the location, bulk, and mass that a proposed structure will occupy on a site. Now, if you guys have ever gone by a proposed construction area and you've seen orange netting way high up in the sky, that's what that is. Okay? And as it turns out, in October of 2010, the city of Burlingame erected a story pole depicting the high-speed rail alignment. Unfortunately, their alignment was too close to the Caltrain track, so they had to take it down for safety reasons. But I would request that the city of Morgan Hill erect a brief story pole construction, someplace that could represent what that's going to look like in the area where we're going to have elevated structures. Okay? And the other request I have is to get an understanding of the acoustic signature of this. Now, what I'm thinking of is that while the story poles are enacted, if we could have a period of time, sorry, better if I read, the acoustic signature test should last not less than 48 hours. And while the story poles are up, position a loudspeaker generating a not worst case sound equivalent to what the train is expected to make rolling through Morgan Hill. The duty cycle of this sound should be representative of the proposed high-speed rail schedule, total northbound and southbound trains. The duration of the sound should be representative of the transit time through Morgan Hill based on the expected train speed through Morgan Hill. And this acoustic test signature should have at least one test every 6 hours, 4 over a 24-hour period, evenly distributed, that would generate a worst-case scenario of what the sound would look like. And finally, the frequency spectrum of the sound should be representative of existing or proposed high-speed rail. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Anybody?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the people that are here, how many think this is a great idea? Okay, and how many think that it's not a good idea? Just the proposal to blast a high-speed rail through here. Not a good idea? Okay, and it's probably for various reasons. Budget. Instead of $33 billion, what we voted for, it's going to be between $68 and $120 billion. I don't know if you guys know that. They were talking about not going through a county park, but they want to go through people's property. They don't want to disturb a county park, but they want to disturb our properties. And I'm not sure why they kind of glossed over that. Also, the Fresno man was already going to sell his business. That was not a good representation of what's going to happen to all of us. So, and anyway, I have a sign sheet if you are against the high-speed rail, if you want to participate. Thanks.
Well, I want to be, for your benefit, and for those people that have questions, we have the lead engineer here that can answer questions, and while you may have comments, and they're good, and we welcome you. Again, go to the city's website, add all the comments. We are collecting all the information as well on your behalf. My recommendation for you tonight is that if we can, let's try to use the time to answer questions, because I know that there are questions in the audience, and I know we have a lot of comments, and happy to spend the time that way if that's what you want, but we have good people here that can answer questions. We have this lady here, and then I see your hand back there.
Well, I've always wondered why the train has to come down this narrow, ecologically important valley where people are living and farms are being occupied and grown, and especially through Coyote Valley. We've had enough of a fight to keep development out of there, and now you want to run a high-speed train through it. Looking at this map, I've always wondered why we can't go from San Jose to Modesto over the Altamont Pass. I mean, it just makes so much more sense. Everything's in place there, and you won't have to rip up Pacheco Pass, which is one of the most beautiful areas in this region, and do the ecological damage there. Can you answer why it's coming down this valley? And while you're at it, tell me why you cannot provide electrified Caltrain down here, along with high-speed rail, if that's what you're bound to do.
I'm afraid I can't answer for Caltrain, but the decision between the Pacheco Pass and the Altamont Pass was subject of a supplement to our original program-wide environmental document that was completed in 2005. At that point, there was still discussion about whether the Pacheco Pass or the Altamont Pass would be the appropriate route. So that was subject of a separate environmental study that was completed in 2008. It's available on the authority's website. That was part of the program document. Because of the scale of this project, it had to take a very high-level statewide view of where the appropriate places were to route the trains. And two of the primary drivers of selecting the Pacheco Pass, one was coming across Altamont. It would mean having another crossing of the bay, which had very sensitive issues crossing the bay. And then the other one was also providing a more complete service to both San Jose and then being able to more fully utilize the Caltrain corridor coming up from San Jose up to San Francisco.
But San Jose is south of the bay. I mean, the Dearborn Station is south of the San Francisco Bay. Go from there up east and hit your San Joaquin corridor. Don't ruin this valley.
I'm saying, I can understand your concerns. The route selection was based on the program document, and so we have to stay within those corridors, and that's why now at a more detailed level we're looking at ways to minimize any impacts of the high-speed train to all the resources, both human and natural.
All right, Tiffany, you have somebody on that side? I know we have somebody here. All right, I'm going to go ahead. You be next.
I'm new to this whole plan, but I am a private resident here. Have been since 1970. And the reason that we have moved here was for the serenity and the country living. Now, is this plan set on concrete, Or do we truly have a voice to say no, that we do not want to pursue this plan? I'll tell you, what does it do to our real estate? We're here because of the country setting. The real estate is really going to impact us as far as trying to sell. You have to give us answers to that.
Okay, I'd say, the project has been approved statewide. So, yes, we are moving it forward. I work for the High Speed Rail Authority, so yes, that's my job to move the project forward. It has been approved. As Morgan represented, construction is underway in the Central Valley, so I would say yes, it is going forward. Regarding questions on real estate, I would have to, if possible, refer you to our right-of-way people. Property is a very individual aspect, and I wouldn't want to make any generalized statements. We do have some right-of-way people here, and they would best be able to answer specific questions you have related to your property.
All right, so we have a lot of hands going up. We're going to go really fast, so ask your questions, and I have that, and then here, and I know there's a lot of hands here. Go.
Okay, so it's obvious that the high-speed rail is going through. So now, are those routes set in concrete, so that they cannot be adjusted anyway? Because I have a feeling that no matter what anybody asks tonight is not going to be heard. It's going to go in one of those routes, and I don't think any of those routes are acceptable. I think if it's going to go along 101, it should go on the west side of 101, where there are no homes, where there is only property. It's going to go on the east side. Oh, it is going on the east side? It's not going the middle of 101. It should go on the east side of 101. Yes. Either go down 101 or on the east side, not the west side of 101, because the west side of 101 has homes. Yeah, they play soccer over there. Yeah, they have a swim facility, but they're not there 24 hours a day. And we are, and our homes are, and the noise is. And we will be displaced, and we will be blighted, and we will have sound, unbearable sound, I believe. It is unbearable sound, regardless of whether it's a couple times a day, 10 times a day, it's going to be there. And I think it's a terrible mistake to do that. And I think this area was picked to go through primarily because our home values are lower than North County, or north of us in South County. And so they don't want to impact the people who have higher property values. They want to impact us. And I think it's wrong. I think it's awful. I think that they shouldn't do the high-speed rail. We have airports. We have trains now. We don't need a high-speed rail. And I don't want it going through Morgan Hill, but I guess...
Thank you very much. All right. We have some technical questions over here. So we're going to try to move to the technical questions.
I have a question about the right-of-way and trying to get a specific answer of what it means and the impact of it. Does that mean eminent domain will be invoked, could be invoked? What exactly does it mean?
So we're still in the preliminary stages of selecting an alternative. So it's premature to determine exactly what our right-of-way needs would be at this time. But once we have a selected preferred alternative and we have a cleared environmental document, then we'll start the right-of-way acquisition process. The right-of-way acquisition process does not need to necessarily invoke eminent domain. It's certainly a tool that's available to the state, but in all honesty, we would prefer to negotiate settlements for real property without invoking eminent domain. So the right-of-way process would start after we have environmental clearance. We would do an appraisal of the property. We would determine whether or not tenants or residents or businesses would have to be relocated. We'd provide assistance with relocation. The property owner would also have an opportunity to obtain his own appraisal. And if an agreement couldn't be reached, then yes, eminent domain is a tool that's available to the state.
So the right-of-way area is expected land to be purchased, and so you guys need about a half-mile area in order to put the high-speed rail system in?
No, we don't need. Why are you asking whether we need a half mile?
Because according to the map, the right-of-way area along the Morgan Hill corridor comes from Monterey to almost my house, which is a quarter mile from Monterey.
Okay, there could be
Quarter mile
various.
on that side plus a quarter mile on the other side is a half mile.
We wouldn't need to obtain property that wasn't needed for our direct facilities. However, we sent out a lot of permission to enter letters, and that area may be greater than the area that we need to obtain for actual acquisition for the rail line. Some of the reasons why varies. It could be for environmental studies, for noise impacts, for various different impacts. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to acquire your property.
Hi, I'm Monty Groves. I'm the president of Fraser Lake Airpark Corporation. On your southern alignment, the rail comes down through Fraser Lake Road, and you build an overpass over Fraser Lake Road. And if it goes on the southern route, that overpass ends right at our entryway. That's a very narrow road. Would there be provisions made for left turning into and out of, off of Fraser Lake Road to prevent traffic coming over the overpass from impacting traffic entering our property? Oh, by the way, we've also submitted our right to request to enter, and we've already sent that letter in. So we just, my question is about a left turn lane at the bottom of that overpass turning into our property, because it comes right down to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I know we moved the alignment to actually avoid going through your air park in the first place. But yeah, so the grade separation, I mean, I would say that is one area where there was actually most likely the most flexibility, and we would definitely need to, as the alternative gets solidified, we will be looking to make sure all the necessary maneuvers are accommodated. So the simple answer would be yes.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate this. My first comment is that I think this is an extreme disservice and discourtesy to the residents to start this meeting at 5:30 and then push us out in favor of the planning meeting, which does not give everybody an opportunity to speak their mind here to you. And since these meetings are few and far between, I think they should be made at a more appropriate time, especially for people who live in North or work in North County and have to come to South County. Secondly, my technical question is, are we to understand that the environmental impact reports have not been done for this area, A? B, we have concerns about the impact on the Coyote Creek Park, the cycling and walking trails through there, and all the wildlife as well. We have concerns about the protection of the green belt that we have fought so hard for over all these years between San Jose and Morgan Hill in South County, which we have been protected. And just the noise and the construction is going to severely impact everything there. And thirdly, where there are trenches that are supposedly a possibility of going through along Monterey Road or 101, how is that going to impact the flood plan for the entire South County to San Jose, which again, those have taken years and years to create and lots of planning, and they are now wonderfully built, but I can just see that it's going to create major problems.
I'll see if I can remember all of those aspects. One thing I can clearly tell you, the environmental document has not been completed. The first thing we have to do is actually get an agreed set of alternatives that we will actually study, and that's the process we're in right now. We had an initial set of alternatives left over from the initial work in 2010-11. Now we've started back up. We're trying to revalidate those alternatives, which is also resulting in us needing to do some adjustments or introduce other variants to those alternatives. We're also looking at where previous alternatives were proposed but no longer make sense because of changes in development or land use or other issues, that we eliminate those so we're not studying an unnecessary number of alternatives. In the Gilroy area, we were looking at up to 8 alternatives, and it got pretty confusing for a lot of people. So we are trying to streamline, but the environmental document has not been done. That is a document that we'd be looking to actually release. It would be sort of spring, early summer of 2017. And then there would be public comment before the final environmental document is completed.
Possibility that the environmental impact report might show that
What the environmental document will do, it will compare the alternatives. There is a no-build alternative, and then plus the other build alternatives. It will do the studies. There will be the wildlife and plant studies, the aquatic studies. There will also be noise, visual, aesthetic studies. There's also, and a lot of these are technical reports which then get appended to and summarized in the environmental document. There's also a hydrology report, and I mean that is one of the issues where we're looking at both station locations with the floodplain there and the floodway through there. We need to assess what impacts, first of all, our project will have. We need to meet with those agencies and then work, first of all, ways to, if we can't avoid the impacts, to minimize the impacts. And then once we've done as much as we can to minimize all the impacts, we then need to work with those agencies to figure out how we mitigate what's left.
So the environmental impact reports might have a major impact on whether or not it's going to be on the east side of 101 or the west side of 1, regardless of what we're talking about today.
Again, I mean, there's multiple aspects to be considered. There are, cost, construction, operation. That comes from all the high-speed train. There's also regulatory requirements such as waters, threatened endangered species. But there's also the human aspect as well. We have to go through identify environmental justice communities. We have to look at disruption to utilities, emergency services, schools, development. We have to do a whole right-of-way impact assessment. And essentially all of those things then get considered by the High-Speed Rail Authority and their board as they make the decision. And the community input is very important because it also helps the board understand the relative importance of each of those issues in a particular area so they can make a more informed decision. Certain things are regulated, but other things are very much subject to the input they received.
We are going to move fast over here with 3 questions, and they're questions, and so take your pencil, and we're just going to shoot 3 questions your way.
Hello, I'm Brian Faircloth, Morgan Hill resident, and you've been working on this for a long time, and thank you for sharing it. But engineering-wise, you must have a couple of routes that you would prefer engineering-wise.
And before you answer that, because I want to put the 3 questions out to you.
What percentage of your total funding is coming from the feds? And if Donald Trump is elected, will you lose those funds? And if you do, how are you going to replace them?
And the last question over here, and then we'll give it back to Tiffany.
I actually have 2 questions. My first, I'm for high-speed rail, not necessarily coming through Morgan Hill. But one question is, how much money is the city of Morgan Hill receiving to allow the train to go through? And can the city actually refuse to allow passage of the high-speed rail through Morgan Hill? Number 2, how many residential sites, homes, land, swimming pools are going to be stolen or taken at low value or low cost on each of these routes? I think we need to know how many homes are being affected directly. And I'm sure you have that number.
Gary.
We don't have the number. I'll maybe work backwards. We don't have the number of homes yet. First of all, we've got to get the alignment agreed. As Guy mentioned, we've then got to establish the footprint. And then as part of our right-of-way studies in the environmental document, we'll identify both residential and commercial displacements. Absolutely. That's why we have several alternatives that we'll be studying, and the choice is made after we've completed those studies. We haven't completed the studies. I don't know the numbers.
All right, moving on to the second. We have 2 other questions here. Or 3, yeah.
The questions about, the authority has been working with the various local agencies to support the decision-making and overview that's needed to deliver the project on the timeline we are at. But we don't actually pay any jurisdiction for the rights to come through. It is a statewide project, and that is what establishes essentially the priority of the project coming through. But we do work very closely with all the local agencies to make sure that we respect and consider what works for them in each area.
And funding. Where is the funding coming from?
That one, unfortunately, I don't know whether Guy might know this. I will defer to him for that one.
$9.9 billion came from Prop 1A. The exact figure for federal money from the stimulus package, I don't have. It's in our 2016 business plan. That sounds about right. It's a little under $4 billion. And most of that's being spent in the Central Valley because we need to spend it as quickly as possible. So they're under construction and they're able to spend the money more quickly. And then the remainder of the money is coming from cap and trade funds, which is... So anyway, the full funding plan is available in our 2016 business plan, and if you want the details, I suggest that you look there.
All right, Tiffany, go ahead.
I have a question.
Maybe just to answer that last question. No, there's a lot of considerations to go in. I'm not trying to dodge the bullet here, but ultimately we want to really get revenue service running as quickly as possible. So ultimately, the alternative I like the most is the one that allows us to actually get the train built soonest, which is generally the one that can at least reach the highest level of acceptance.
I have a question over here. Over here. In the areas where the alignments go either on the west or east side of Highway 101, is there any reason why it couldn't be engineered to go down the center? Because it would also reduce the noise issue and any housing issues.
Yes, there is. Unfortunately, the highway system was designed to essentially be operated by vehicles going at 70 miles an hour. Our trains need to be going upwards of 200 miles an hour. Back in 2000, I think it was 10, we made the presentation to the council. They made that same comment. So we actually put a high-speed train alignment down the median just to see what we would get. We got 90 miles an hour. So the reason why we are not in the median is we cannot stay in the median because that is too slow an alignment. It's got too many twists for high-speed train. But we are looking where possible to essentially co-locate within the state right-of-way adjacent on one side of the highway or the other.
I'm one of the residents that would be impacted if it does go down the west side of 101, literally in my backyard. How wide is the right-of-way, and like was mentioned before, the housing values? If the right-of-way is wide enough, would they remove those houses along the west side of 101?
I mean, the approximate right-of-way needed for when we're on an elevated structure, a bridge structure, essentially our structure is about 50 foot wide, but we also need to have access to those structures, so we're looking at about a 65 foot wide right-of-way. How that impacts an individual property, it sort of depends whether we go right through the middle of the property, along an edge of the property, and I again would encourage you to talk to our right-of-way people to get some more information exactly how that would affect your property.
Go for it.
Dale Mattson. I've been in town here almost 40 years. If the west side would take my property, according to the drawings I've seen, if I have to sell my property to you and I have to replace my home, my taxes will quadruple because I've been in my home over 20 years. Who's going to pay for that? Am I just screwed?
We'll have to defer to the right-of-way people. I know.
I got you, and I got you.
Hello? I'm one of the few people that are on the east side of the freeway that will be impacted by this. The canal that's there now, they're talking about moving it. Are they going to put it in a pipe and bury it, or are they going to push it farther to the east? And like you said, you're 65 feet. There's not much room between the edge of the freeway and the properties on that side. I live there and have a business there. I have the only rodeo facility in the county. You can't just pick that up and move it anywhere. It doesn't work like that.
That is true. There are definitely some unique properties that we would have to figure out how we deal with, same with the way station. But to answer the first question, we were locating ourselves, again, as much as we could, sort of co-locating Caltrans right-of-way. The channel, I think that's water recharge as well, that would need to be moved over. So that would be sort of part of the footprint of the project, would be enough space for the high-speed train, for running the trains, plus maintenance access, plus the relocation of the canal to the east. because the west would be, in that alternative, the west would have been right in the middle of the freeway, so it would have to go further to the east. So that would be all considered as part of the project footprint and evaluated as part of the impacts of that alternative.
Hello, yay.
That's working.
I would like to ask that the mitigations be professional as possible because there will be effects. There will be harm. There will be losses. But I also believe that high-speed rail is a critical resource for our future. I'm in my 5th decade of seeing changes down here in the South County from development and increased traffic and all of those things. And I grew up in San Jose before Silicon Valley, before aerospace. I've taken high-speed rail in Europe and in England. It's a critical resource for the continued economic health of the Bay Area, not just a tourist toy. And I'd like mitigations to be strong, but accept that there will be losses.
Just quickly regarding the mitigations, as Morgan identified, we have both a technical working group and a community working group, and also once we've done the environmental document, there'll be public comment. So all of those avenues provide ways for people to suggest mitigations, and one of the things we'll be working, especially with our technical working groups and our community working groups, is to make sure that the proposed mitigations are suitable for the impacts and actually fit within the county and don't sort of make things worse. They actually do work as mitigations for any of the impacts. But that's going to be something that we'll develop once we've done the initial technical studies and identified the impacts first.
Regarding the 2 Gilroy station options, I think the downtown Gilroy with the existing station is definitely the preferred option. You'll have a tremendous opportunity to bring people who are traveling down Friday afternoon on 101 to get to the Monterey Bay Area. And then with the future Monterey extensions, maybe to that station as well, you'll have a great impact to 101, and that'll really assist and be a benefit to the community here to take some of those people out of their cars in 101, because there will be connectivity between that Gilroy station down to Monterey. On the east side, there will not be connectivity from that station to be able to get down to Monterey. So you've got a station in the middle of nowhere that will only serve your needs and not the intermodal needs, which should be the desire of this group.
True, and we will need to, assess both of that. Gilroy is very much in favor of a downtown. It does have a lot more connectivity, and a East Gilroy station would need to account for that the lack of direct connection, and there would have to be some kind of connectivity shuttle bus. And again, that would be identified within our ridership models in the environmental document.
I want to state, I'm a resident of Morgan Hill. I'm in favor of high-speed rail. I like this lady over here. I've taken it in Europe. It's critical if you want to get around. 101 is inadequate for current traffic. I believe this will improve local traffic on 101, hopefully. But my only concern is to make sure that the viaduct and the percolation system either remain the same or get improved during this project.
And just to clarify, you say the percolation, you're talking about the groundwater recharge? Yes, okay, thank you.
I had somebody here, back here. Thank you.
You're after her. Thank you. My name is Connie, and we live on a property that my husband has lived for 70 years. It's been in the family, and we are right at the corner of Monterey Road where the possibility of the high-speed rail will be. So my question is, why has San Martin not been included in any plans? We have come to all the meetings except last weekend. I apologize, last week I missed that. But we've been asked, what do you recommend? We suggested some things. The next meeting we come and the maps are changed and there's no recognition of what I've said. Plus, every time I come to the meeting, I include my address, name, and email and phone number, and I have yet to receive any information from high-speed rail. So I'm disappointed. I'd like to know what is the definition of at grade. I'm told that they really are
tall berms that the rail is going to be on. Initially, we were told at 2 of the first meetings in Gilroy and Morgan Hill that the trains were going to run through San Martin at 65 feet in the air, and that didn't seem to make sense, but being on tall berms, it would simply make sense. Also, what about the 100-foot barriers that are going to be like the Berlin Wall dividing East and West Berlin? We're told they're going to be 100-foot barrier walls on either side of the track for the noise. Is that indeed true? And I don't believe you really reached out to San Martin and taking our voice seriously. Thank you.
So first of all, the question about the at grade. We're actually, as we go through this, we are actually changing it to sort of call it embankment, since that is a better description. In the Morgan Hill, Gilroy area, the high-speed train as it comes through Morgan Hill would typically be on a berm of 5 to 10 feet. That is essentially established by how high we have to be able to get the underpasses in that would connect still to Butterfield and Monterey. As we get down to Gilroy, the road network gets much tighter, and there the berms go up to 15 to 20 feet high. And when I say those heights, what I'm giving you is to the height of the rail. If we're at grade beyond that, you're most likely looking, if necessary, for sound mitigation, a potential sound wall, and that would be approximately about 16 feet high to the height of the wire. So at most you'll be looking at a wall, if it was a berm with a sound wall on top, up to 35 feet high. I've not heard the 100 feet one before, but always good to hear new information. So if we're on, and then just to clear as well, if we're on an elevated structure, since we're higher up, we don't need the same height of sound barrier. On an aerial structure, typically the barrier, if a sound barrier is needed, it would be more in the 7 to 8 feet range.
Hi, my name is Leslie Miles, and I've attended this will be my third, maybe fourth, event, and my understanding is that you're really looking at 4 different options, and that you have about 2 months to be able to determine which of the potentially 4 options make the most sense to move ahead and do additional investigation. And just to follow up on Connie's point, one of my concerns is really the option 1, which was the at-grade option that goes right to the east of the UP tracks through the center of Morgan Hill, and would potentially be a 12 to 15 foot high berm with an additional wall. So really a 30-foot wall going straight through Morgan Hill, adjacent to the UP tracks, and that it also would only allow for 4 roads to penetrate. So it would be Cochrane, Tenet, and then East Dunn and Main. I think that's an important one to eliminate right off the bat, because it is clearly very divisive of the community, and it also affects many of the buildings, businesses, residences that have been recently constructed, as well as older homes as well. Is that a fairly accurate representation of that at grade?
I would say yes.
Thank you.
I would just say, maybe Butterfield would still go over, so there would be that other connection at the south, but that would be we'd go underneath Butterfield.
Thank you for being here. I have 2 questions, so I'll keep them short. First question is, I probably haven't done my homework, but where can I go to find the business case for this? The revenue, the maintenance expense, and the projections for the next 10, 20 years?
That's all on the authority website under the business plan.
Okay, good. I'd like to do that. And then secondly, I can see that the properties that are right in the corridor have their value reduced probably to 0, but what about the properties that are close, that are within a distance where they're affected by the noise, the traffic, their values are significantly reduced? Will there be some compensation for that?
I hate to say this again, but I would have to defer you to the right-of-way people so I don't give you false information.
Are they here? Can they answer that?
There are a couple of people here. I mean, yes, the direct impact is much more straightforward. It's property acquisition. The intent would be is that we would implement mitigations to reduce the impacts beyond the direct, but if there is still some remaining impacts, there I believe is a mechanism where an owner can demonstrate that they have suffered harm as a result of the project and can then seek compensation from the project. But again, I will defer to the right-of-way people on that item.
Thank you.
One more. My name is Jeff DuBridge. I live right along East Main, about 2 blocks along the west side of 101. My request is to please stick the train along the current tracks that run along with Monterey Road. The price of my house will plummet if you stick the stick the train just a couple blocks away from my house, and there's others that also live around there. So that's just my only.
So, thank you. Being cognizant of time and realizing, I promise you the microphone. All right, we will make that the last question. We have all the planning commissioners here ready to get started with the meeting. We're going to move to the other room. The right-of-way people are here. We can continue the conversation. I did promise you the mic. You're the last question.
Can you give us the relative cost of at grade, elevated, through trenches, just so we get the idea of where it is?
The relative cost?
Relative cost.
I would typically say, compared to at grade, and if we're talking like just the actual track rails and just the sort of basic, let's say, okay, so typically I would say, depending on the complexity, structures generally run 3 to 5 times more than being at grade, and trenches, I would say, run about 5 to 10 times more than being at grade, and tunnels are sort of at the 10 times or plus, depending on the complexity of the geology.
I apologize, I don't mean to move you out, but we just have a lot of people to move. Are there any burning questions before we shift to the other room? Burning question, super quick.
Why not tunnel the whole thing?
Why not tunnel the whole thing? That's a quick answer.
But that would exceed our available funding.
All right, before you go, may I tell you what is the city's next step? Is that okay? So before you go, we from the city staff are doing our own homework in trying to understand the impact of this project, to understand what it looks like. Nobody understands what the big berm looks like. And we are hoping to come back to the city council with more information at the next meeting in October. And you have an opportunity to come to the council meeting where somebody asked, what's the difference between the alignments in terms of number of properties impacted? We are doing our own internal assessment that we are then passing on to high-speed rail, and we invite you to engage. Please go to the city's website so we can send out email invitations to you for the next conversation. And right now I'm just going to officially thank High Speed Rail for coming and invite you, if you want to continue chatting, to join us next door.